boys and girls. I wanted to give you a presentation today that I know you've been wanting to see for quite some time. It's called the City of Jerusalem. So if you remember in the map of Israel, where Jesus lived, this whole country was where Jesus lived when he was here on earth. And there were three major cities: Nazareth, Bethlehem, and Jerusalem. Do you remember what happened at Nazareth? That's where Mary had the angel come to her and invite her into God's plan, and Mary said yes. This is also where Joseph and Mary raised Jesus, here in Nazareth. Do you remember when Mary and Joseph had to travel all the way down to Bethlehem to get counted in the census? And while we were there in that small town, the time came for Mary to have the child Jesus. Right here in Bethlehem is where Jesus was born. But then there was a big city near this small town called Jerusalem. And do you remember what made Jerusalem so holy? The temple. The Jews, the ancient people who loved God, they would all travel to this holy city every year at Passover. We're going to look at that today, and we're going to find those different areas of Jerusalem where Jesus and Mary and Joseph often went to pray. Jerusalem was such a big city that everyone wanted to get to. There were walls around the city that kept the city protected and safe from the large crowds that came there. And each of the walls, there were gates. There were ports of entry into this city. Let's look inside this city that the people came to. We see right here a house that's called the Cenacle. This is where Jesus gathered with his 12 best friends, the apostles. Do you remember that special meal he had in the Cenacle called the Last Supper? It was here where Jesus said words that we had never heard him say before. During the Passover, he said those words, "Take and eat, this is my body, given up for you. Take and drink, this is the cup, poured out for you." These words seem like strange words, but they were Jesus' way of saying, I'm going to remain with you here. I'm going to remain with you here in this special prayer we call the Mass. That all happened in this little house called the Cenacle. We know after that supper that Jesus went with his best friends out to the garden, and there were olive trees there. It's called the Garden of Olives. It was here in this garden where one of his friends betrayed him. That means that one of his friends did something that was unkind. And while Jesus was there praying, he was taken away. He was taken away because the people thought that he was lying. They thought that he wasn't really the Son of God. But we know the truth. Jesus is God. Jesus was not afraid. Jesus knew this was going to happen. He's God, and he's all-powerful. After they took Jesus from the Garden of Olives, they brought him to the high priest Caiaphas. The high priest lived in this house right here. This is called the house of Caiaphas. The high priest Caiaphas didn't believe Jesus that he was God, and so he sent him to King Herod. This is called Herod's palace. And Herod sent Jesus to the governor, the Roman governor called Pontius Pilate. Pontius Pilate ruled from this tower called the Tower of Antonia. And it was here at this tower that the crowds started to shout to crucify Jesus, our Good Shepherd. But Jesus, he was not afraid. Jesus is God, and he knew what was going to happen. There they gave Jesus a cross to carry because they thought Jesus wasn't telling the truth. Jesus, he carried his cross all throughout the city, all the way to the top of this hill that we call the Hill of Calvary. It was here on the Hill of Calvary where Jesus, the Good Shepherd, laid down his life for us, the sheep, because Jesus, to continue to tell the truth, that he is God. And Jesus, the Good Shepherd, after laying down his life, was placed into the tomb. But we know that Jesus is stronger than death, and that on the third day, Jesus rose. Jesus is the light of the world. Christ be our light, shine in our hearts, shine through the darkness. Christ be our light, shine in your church, gathered today. Jesus also often went here. Did you notice I saved this one for the last? This one is called the temple. And the temple was their church. That's where the scrolls, the paper that they wrote, the words of God from the Bible, they kept those here. They kept the Holy Bible here in the temple. During this time, there was only one Holy Bible in all the world. Can you imagine? And so everyone came to the temple to listen to the Pharisees and the Sadducees read from these scrolls so they could hear the words of God. The temple was why this city was such a city where everyone wanted to come. Jesus often went to that temple to pray. Do you remember that time when Mary and Joseph, they lost Jesus when he was a young boy, when he was a teenager? Because his whole town had traveled from Nazareth to Jerusalem to go to this temple. And when they found Jesus, he was in the temple teaching about the Holy Bible. Do we have a temple today? Do we have a holy place where we listen to the Word of God? Where we come to spend time with Jesus? You're right, it's our church at St. Philomena. Some of you have been listening to Father David celebrate the gift of the Holy Mass at home. That's amazing, isn't it, that our church is in our home? We know that Jesus is with us, right? That Jesus is in our church. But where else is he? In heaven? You're right. I hear you. Some of you are saying, yeah, you're right. He's in our heart. Let's say a prayer today thanking God that we have a holy temple, that we have a church here that's so close to us, but that God is even closer, that he's in each of our souls. Jesus, thank you for showing us this holy city. Thank you for giving us those special words in the Cenacle, the words of the Last Supper that we get to hear every time we listen and enter into the prayer of the Mass. Thank you for remaining with us in our church and in our hearts and in our homes. Thank you for being the light of the world. Help us to be your light today to all those we see. Christ be our light, shine in our hearts. Shine through the darkness. Christ be our light. Shine in your church, gathered today. Boys and girls, today maybe you'd like to do a prayer drawing of how you are the light of Christ in your home. Maybe today you can think of ways that you can be helpful today at home to share God's love with one another. God bless you, boys and girls. Have a good day.